Right. Okay. Yeah, that's probably it. I was thinking that would probably be, which is great. Okay, yeah, I will. Okay. All right. So this is number 6 in a series of 7. And during the last 5 times that we have met, we have studied the great controversy as revealed in Revelation 12 and 13. Well, 12 because we haven't got to 13 yet. Today we're getting to 13. And just a quick review. So in Revelation 12, Jesus was born. Satan tried to kill him. Jesus successfully fulfilled the plan of salvation and returned to heaven. And at that time, just as Jesus had prophesied before he went back to heaven, all power and authority on heaven and earth were bestowed upon him. Satan refused to submit to him, so he was thrown from heaven for what I believe to be a second and final time. And the proof for that in the Bible is that Job obviously was, the story of Job happened after creation, and Satan had access to heaven, the heavenly courts, at the time of Job. So he knows that the plan of salvation is sure. He knows that his time is short. And this is why he is very angry. He has falsely claimed that he's king of the earth. Jesus actually mentioned that while he was here on earth. The early Christian church suffered severe persecution under the Roman Empire. And at the end of chapter 12, the pagan Roman Empire is coming to an end. And we left the dragon on the seashore waiting for his next ally that he could work through, just like he worked through the Egyptians to oppress God's people, through the Assyrians, through the Babylonians, through the Medo-Persians, through the Greeks, although the Bible's pretty silent on the Greeks because there's a 404 or 450 year period of time there that we don't have, after Malachi, between Malachi and Matthew, that we don't have information for. Just as he worked through the Roman Empire. they suffered persecution. So this next entity is going to come up out of the sea, which means an area of many nations, multitudes, and tongues. And it will be where God's people are, and they predominantly were in the continent of Europe. Of course, there's no surprise to anyone. The Eastern Asian Empire was there, the Chinese and the Japanese and all those ancient civilizations, but there weren't any Christians there, as far as we know, and so God wouldn't be that interested in that area because he's watching over his people and telling us a story about his church. So we've been told that this new entity will be different from the others. And so what we're going to do today is look at the sea beast, look at its characteristics, and look at what it accomplished during its 1,260-year reign that it was given. And then we will use our knowledge and wisdom to come to conclusions about what it represents. And I want to remind everyone that the Hebrews used chiastic structure, and we are in books 12 and 13, which are the central portion of the book of Revelation. And so this is where the top of the ladder is. This is the zenith, the important point of, according to the author. So was the author John or was the author God? Okay, so I chose for a memory verse, I like Amos 3:7 because it says, surely the sovereign Lord never does anything until he reveals his plans to his servants, the prophets. So he revealed this plan to John, and he's faithfully revealed it to us. So first we'll have a short review of our symbols, and then we'll launch into Revelation 13, 1 to 10. We'll plug in the symbols that we've learned the meanings of, and this should go more quickly than they have in the past. So let's start with a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we're so thankful for these end-time messages that you've seen fit to let us know the events of the last days. We pray for the wisdom of the Holy Spirit. We pray we'll gain knowledge as we study this. And should we be the ones that live during the time of the fulfillment of these prophecies, that we will recognize them. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, quickly, beasts, heads, mountains, and horns, all in Daniel and Revelation represent nations, kingdoms, or powers. These are the ones God talks about are the ones that have interacted with his people, his church, and so they're the ones that we'll be looking at. Crowns represent monarchies or kingdoms, and mark, that was one of the more difficult symbols, and the conclusion that we came to is the way that this word is used in Revelation indicates that it is a noteworthy feature that functions as a sign or act of allegiance to someone or something. A noteworthy feature that functions as a sign or act of allegiance to someone or something. And then 666, the number of a beast and the number of a man. We decided that we can't be extremely dogmatic about what this represents because everyone cautions you. James White, Loughborough, J.N. Andrews, Ellen White, everyone says to be careful because we're not 100% certain what this means, but after our study, I think that vicarious filii Dei should be at the top of our list right now. And then just walking over here, Margaret told me that she heard that our new Pope Leo XIV is taking the name vicarious, what exactly? Oh, Vicar of Christ, yeah, Vicar of Christ. So this is kind of interesting in light of prophecy. So let's read about the first beast of Revelation, the sea beast. We'll look at his characteristics and see if we can figure out what power it represents. So from Revelation 13:1, I've kind of put in bold print the features that, the symbols that we've studied, and I put in parentheses beside it what they represent. So, then I saw a beast, a nation or power, rising up out of the sea, an area of multitudes, nations, and tongues, the continent of Europe. It had 7 heads, and I've called that nations or powers, and 10 horns, additional future nations and powers, with 10 crowns on its horns, future monarchies, written on each head. Written on each head. For those of you that haven't done PowerPoint, I have 2 slides up here. You can only see one. Written on each head, heads, nations, were names that blaspheme God. So what's blasphemy? So it could be insulting God, showing lack of reverence for God, or claiming the attributes of God. Okay? And we have some examples of blasphemy in the scriptures. Remember, Jesus forgave sin, and the Jews all went nuts because they said, you're claiming you're God. Okay. This beast, nation or power, looked like a leopard. A leopard was Greece, as you recall, in Daniel's vision, parallel vision. But it had the feet of a bear, which was Medo-Persia, and the mouth of a lion, which was Babylon. Interesting, they're done in reverse order here. And the dragon, Satan, gave the beast, the sea beast, the one that's coming up out of the water now, his own power and throne and great authority. This means, so these features of these different beasts would indicate that the beast has features of these, the sea beast has features of these beasts that it kind of looks like. And so you think, well, what features were those powers famous for? First of all, they were all wealthy nations. Secondly, they had pagan forms of worship. And thirdly, they oppressed and or persecuted God's people. So that would be some characteristics that this entity would have. Satan has made a false claim that he is the ruler of this world, and Jesus recognized this claim in John 12:31, and again in John 14:30, and again in John 16:11. It's the only time I haven't made slides of Bible text. I was going to read them from my phone, which I set on the first pew, so I won't read them. But you can, if you don't believe me, you can look them up. John 12:31, John 14:30, and John 16:11. He calls Satan the king of this earth. I've probably gone through these 100 times, and every time I add something. So I went through it again in the last couple of days, and I thought, I'm just going to put these texts in here, but I'm not going to make slides out of them. I'll just read them. And that's the first time I've ever deviated from my habit of putting everything on the slide. So Jesus says in John 12:31, the time for judging this world has come when Satan, the ruler of this world, will be cast out. And then in John 14:30, Jesus says, I don't have much more time to talk to you because the ruler of this world approaches. He has no power over me. And then in John 16:11, judgment will come because the ruler of this world has already been judged. Verse 3, Revelation 13:3. I saw that one of the heads, nations or powers, of this beast seemed wounded beyond recovery, but the fatal wound was healed. This is the only part of the first half of Revelation 13 that is a future event. All the rest of it is past. So you think since it's past, we can look back and just say, well, look, this, as historicists, we can see what entity fulfilled it, or what happened during the time period that satisfies a prophecy. The whole world, so this is a universal scope here, the whole world marveled at this miracle and gave allegiance, loyalty or devotion to the sea beast. Okay, so the first half of Revelation was prophetic about the past, but the red print is a future event. Sometimes Revelation uses a tense of, in their speech, in its language here, that the event has already happened, but I forget what that's called, but they speak of them as a certainty because they will happen. God cannot lie. What he says will come to pass. I don't know. No, this is like saying they're standing with God on Mount Zion. They will be in the future, but it's such a certainty that it's going to happen that they use it. I don't know if it's perfect present tense or something like that. Okay. All right. Yeah. But it's such a certainty that they can mention it as though it's already happened. Okay. We'll move on here to okay. Yeah, he was seeing a vision of the future that was happening then, and he's telling us about what he's seeing in the future. Yeah, that makes sense. So, continuing on, verse 3, marveled at this miracle of his wound being healed, and gave allegiance to the beast, the sea beast. Verse 4, they, the people that marveled, worshiped the dragon, who is Satan, for giving the beast, the sea beast, such power. And they also worshiped the beast. The sea beast is a religious power. So we're going to be looking at its characteristics. Well, one of them is that it receives worship. Now, I want you to notice here that because they worship the beast and they worship the dragon. That is, when you think about that and you think, people are they knowingly or unknowingly worshiping the dragon? If you're deceived by some religious entity, and so you're worshiping false doctrine, are you worshiping the dragon if he's the one that was instrumental in getting the false doctrine inserted in there? And can you do it unknowingly? It's like Beverly said, this is about the future. This is about a time in the future when the gospel will have gone to the whole world and people may have known what's going on. Could you be held accountable for worshiping? Just worshiping the false doctrine is bad enough, but it seems like worshiping the dragon's worse. Yeah. I know, but if you went and told people that, you're worshiping. Well, I just told them. Yeah. Yeah. We all know before the mark of the beast, right? Anyhow, I think that's a pretty poignant idea. You're worshiping the dragon, even though you're deceived. Okay. So I wrote in here, can one unknowingly worship Satan by worshiping a false entity that he is manipulating? Okay, I chose this as the example of the sea beast with his bear-like claws, leopard-like body, lion head and mouth with all the crowns. And I don't know if you remember, but I remember because I had already picked this when Ryan Day was here. This is the same picture that he used. Okay, continuing on. Who is as great as the beast? They exclaimed. Who is able to fight against him? This is like a parody of Christ. Maybe we need a bigger styrofoam thing there. Parody of Christ. Who is as great as the beast? Well, Jesus is greatest. He's greater than the beast. Who is able to fight against him? Like he's so powerful and so knowledgeable that no one can fight against him, but obviously Jesus can and will win, or has won, if you use that tense. Did you say Arius? Aroist? Yeah. Does everyone know him? His name's Jim McLean. He's a pastor from some town 10 miles east of Salem, Oregon. Retired. Yeah. Anyhow, I appreciate his comment. So, verse 5. Then the beast, the sea beast, was allowed to speak great blasphemies against God, which is slander or claim the attributes of. And he, the sea beast, was given authority. Remember, nothing can happen without God allowing it. So he's given authority to do whatever he wanted for 42 months, which is 1,260 days, which we've already talked about, day for a year, 1,260 years. Verse 6, he spoke terrible words of blasphemy against God, which is showing lack of reverence for or claiming the attributes of God. So I just put a few of the Roman Catholic Church blasphemies. The tabernacle, by claiming that so he's blaspheming the tabernacle by claiming that the mediatorial work that Jesus is doing in their cathedrals, because the mediatorial work that Christ is doing for us is being done in their cathedrals because the priest mediates for us and because salvation comes through them. It blasphemes God by claiming to forgive our sin during confession. And it, of course, that work is being done in the heavenly tabernacle by Jesus himself. So he, the sea beast, was given authority, allowed to by God, to do whatever he wanted for 42 months. And verse 6, he spoke terrible words of blasphemy against God. Oh, I started reading the second slide up here, so you guys were not seeing what I was seeing. Maybe after I do this for a few years, I'll get better at it. And he spoke terrible words of blasphemy against God, showing lack of reverence or claiming the attributes of God. Verse 6, continuing, slandering his name and his dwelling. That is, those who dwell in heaven. Here, I think, is that same tense of speech. Verse 7, and the beast, the sea beast, was allowed to wage war against God's holy people, persecution, and to conquer them. And he, the sea beast, was given authority to rule over every tribe and people and language and nation. I'm sorry. I'm getting worse. Every tribe, people, language, and nation. I put in parentheses there in 538. We'll talk about that more later. We're going to look at the 1260-day prophecy in a little more detail here after we finish the description of the sea beast in Revelation 13. And all the people who belong to this world, that expression right there is for the people that are not God's people. And that's the phrase that is used in Revelation to refer to the people that are not God's people. All the people who belong to this world worship the beast, the sea beast. They are the ones whose names were not written in the book of life that belongs to the Lamb. So I just want to pause for a moment here. They are not the ones whose names were not written in the book of life. So I was at Loma Linda in February, and I went to this class by Pastor Roy Ice. It's called Bible Lab. And in there, it's an amphitheater with 300 seats. If you get there late, you're standing in the aisles. And he has kind of an interesting way of presenting things. There's television cameras. People are watching from Africa and South America, all over the world. And he takes calls. They like message in, and then people are sitting there looking at the computer, and then they ask him questions. And then we are all given cards so that he'll ask questions and we can hold up yes, no, maybe, I don't know, that type of thing. So, and then he'll say, oh, 90% yes. And so last time we were there, he said, everyone that ever lived, name, was written in the book of life when they were born. Everyone that ever lived. And that's a concept I'd never heard before. And I asked him a question about it, actually. And as we, here's this guy up there, this famous guy with this big Sabbath school class, and you just think, well, he must know what he's talking about. Well, then I'm reading this, and it says, whose names were not written in the book of life. So I think that contradicts, what a source of relief. Like everybody in the room is like, oh yeah, and then he says, so your name is in there unless you ask God to take it off. Your name is in there. He actually gave a text, and I have it in my phone. I took pictures of it and stuff, but I think it's in Revelation 4 or 5, but I don't remember it right offhand. But this is, I think, well, yeah, I don't know. Whose names were not, okay, well, you could be right. They were there, they asked for them to be removed, or they lived in such a way that they were removed. And that might be the way one should approach this verse. Okay. This happens to me a lot. When I'm teaching, I have this erroneous concept and somebody clears it up. Yeah. Anyhow, I don't know. It's like almost like the gospel of prosperity. You tell somebody, every name is there, and it will be there unless you ask him to remove it. You say, well, I've never done that. We all probably feel like we fall short, but I never asked him to remove it, so I'm in. Okay. Oh, Revelation 3:5. I put it in my notes here, Pastor. Revelation 3:5. Here I put in here, I was told recently at a Sabbath school class in Loma Linda that everyone who ever lived will have their name written in the book of life until they ask for it to be removed, or they live in such a way that that shows God that they do not want their name in the book. He cited Revelation 3:5. He who overcomes shall be clothed in white raiment, and I will not blot out his name from the book of life. I think that this text that we just read does not convey the idea, but now I'd have to say that I may have seen it wrongly. Okay. But still, the name could have been there. Okay. So there's another way you could look at it. You were converted, you're justified, and you came to Jesus, and your name was put in there. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's good. Hey, we may have learned something here today. Yeah. That's right. Well, we prayed for that at the beginning. Okay. So, continuing on. Who was slaughtered before the world was made, when the plan of salvation was set up. So, that's the end of the sea beast. So we're going to look now at his characteristics and talk a little about the 1260-year reign. Revelation 3:5. Is that the text you're wondering about? Okay. That's a good point. If your human nature is sinful, then how could your name be in the book of life? Yeah. Next time I'm down there, I'll talk to him about that. Right. Okay, good. All right, let's look at some characteristics. It rises up out of the sea, which is the opposite of wilderness area, which is multitudes, peoples, and nations and tongues, okay? And that where God's people were at the time, on the continent of Europe. It rises up after the fall of the Roman Empire. So it receives its power and its throne from the dragon. The question is that the red dragon or the non-red dragon? We know that that when the pagan empire fell apart, I'm going to jump ahead of myself a little bit. In 533, Justinian the Great, the emperor of Rome, ruling from Constantinople, rewrote all of the laws of the Roman Empire. And in those laws, he added some and took some out. And ones he added were, he wanted to rid the nation of paganism and Sabbath keepers. So he had strict laws about how to deal with Sabbath keepers and pagan worshipers. That was in 533. He also gave powers to the Pope, but he could not exercise the power because the Pope was in Rome and he's in Constantinople. Rome is in the hands of the Ostrogoths. So he could not go to Rome and give this guy all these power over anything, because actually the Pope had been removed by the Ostrogothic king and he had put in his puppet Pope. As soon as Belisarius conquered Rome from the Ostrogoths, he appointed a new Pope. And the one that was there actually died in prison. I think they didn't feed him and he died because he collaborated with the enemy, okay? So when it says the dragon gave him his power, the red dragon also, working through Herod the Great, tried to kill Jesus when he was born. The red dragon was the civil entity that pronounced crucifixion on Jesus. And so the red dragon was also the entity that gave all this power to the Pope, but it couldn't be exercised until after they had reclaimed it. Now Satan is working through this entity. He wants this church, he's got a new, first he used coercion and persecution, and now he's going to use deception. What an ingenious idea. You can persecute people, kill them, take away everything they have, not let them own property, not let them have jobs and do all that kind of stuff to them to get them to do what you want. But how about this? Work through their church and put false doctrine in there and deceive them. That's an even better idea, isn't it? So, moving on, it receives worship. So we're looking for a religious power. It speaks blasphemies. It slanders God or claims attributes of God. It also is a persecuting power. It has a powerful 42-month reign. Day for a year, 1,260 days. It thinks to change, now we have to go to Daniel for this one. This says in Revelation, actually. It will think to change times and laws. Number 8, somewhere in the future, from John's perspective, it receives a seemingly deadly wound that is healed at a more future time. Number 9, the nation or power in question has characteristics of the nations of Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and what that might these be. I already told you: wealth, arrogance, false religion, oppressive laws, persecuting God's people. And so I'm not going to waste a lot of our time. We've all heard this before. I just say, friends, it's not that difficult to figure out what entity this beast power represents. Using the historicist method of interpretation, we can look back at Western Europe after the fall of the Roman Empire in the early part of the 6th century, around 538, and we can see what power came on the scene. It was a religious power. It received its throne and authority from the pagan Roman Empire at a time when it was transitioning to a Christian power. It would have a 1,260-year powerful reign. During this 1,260-year powerful reign, it would blaspheme God, calling itself Christian. It would oppress and persecute God's people even to death. It was responsible for finding millions of Christian people guilty of heresy and then turning them over to the state civil powers which they had united with for execution. So this is how, if the Roman Catholic Church denies that it executed people. And the reason it did, because it had united with a state power, and so it turned them over to the state power. The state power actually is the one that did the crucifixion. Just like Jesus was crucified by the Roman government, not the Jews. Although they wanted him crucified, they would have done it if they hadn't been not allowed to do it. But, oh, by the way, Caiaphas had been the high priest for a while, years, but he was removed from that position because he kept giving people the death penalty. And so they took him out of the position of high priest. But remember, when Jesus was arrested, the first place he went was to Caiaphas' house. So it was one of Caiaphas' sons that became the next high priest. But he was a puppet, and Daddy was still pulling the strings. So Jesus went to Caiaphas. And that was because of the fact that they had not allowed them. They could still have their Sanhedrin court, and they could still deal with all kinds of problems, but they could not use capital punishment. So the Roman Catholic Church tried to change times and laws by trying to force God's people to worship on Sunday instead of the seventh-day Sabbath as commanded by God. It also incorporated pagan festivals into the worship calendar. Amazing Facts has a really nice presentation on this. If you haven't seen it, it's called Baptized Paganism. You can go on the Amazing Facts website and search for Baptized Paganism, and you can read about stuff like December 25 is the birthday of the sun. Isn't that interesting? The sun god was one of the most powerful gods in the Roman pantheon of gods, and his birthday was December 25, and for now we celebrate Christ's birth on December 25. Plus Easter and Halloween and all these other pagan things that have crept their way into the Christian church. Sure? Right. Oh. Huh. Interesting. Yeah. Huh. Nice. Okay. What's that? Interesting. Yeah, he's been really generous with Satan, hasn't he? I didn't mention this, but Jesus got 1,260 days on earth to show us what the kingdom of God is like, and then he gives Satan 1,260 years to do his thing, to try to convince people that God is not just and whatever. So no one will ever be able to say, well, you didn't give him enough time. So let's look at a parallel prophecy about changing times and laws in Daniel 7:25. He will defy the Most High and oppress the holy people on the Most High, and he will try to change their sacred festivals and laws, and they will be placed under his control for times, and half a time. So that was the only thing I said, that characteristic that didn't come from Revelation. I just wanted to show that to you. Oh, by the way, as a Roman, pagan Roman empire conquered other nations, they loved having this pantheon of multiple gods. So if they conquered another nation and they had a god that they didn't have already in their pantheon of gods, they were happy to add them. And I don't even think they were that unhappy with adding the Christian God, except that he was a jealous God, and that they didn't like that, of course. So what I have here is the Persians worshipped Mithras, the sun god, and the Romans gladly accepted that wholeheartedly. So the Roman Catholic Church tried to change God's holy and eternal Ten Commandments by deleting the second, which it denies, by the way. If you Google it, they'll say we didn't delete it. And by dividing the 10th, thus fulfilling the prophecy we just read in Daniel 7:25. So the Roman Catholic Church forgives sin, or claims to forgive sin during the act of confession. By the way, did you know there are 7 sacred sacraments of the Catholic Church? And that if you don't, this is what the people are taught, if you don't do the 7 sacred sacraments, you can't go to heaven. You'll end up in purgatory. And I don't know if I can remember them all, but one of them, of course, is confession, and one is communion, and one is last rites. So they have a lot of power over Catholic people when they die, because if you don't have last rites, then you got to go to purgatory. And that's why in the 1500s, when they were trying to get money to build St. Peter's, the new St. Peter's, the old St. Peter's was built like in the 600s or 700s, and it was a wooden structure mainly, and so it was falling apart, and they wanted to build a nice new facility. And so they needed money, and so I think it was Leo the 10th was Pope then, and he sent people out, and there are recorded, I think we've seen this in some of the Amazing Facts evangelist talks, that they would go from town to town with a crier, and then a bishop would tell people, the crier would say, come all that have children and babies in purgatory, and mothers and fathers, and for a small amount of money we can assist them getting to heaven faster. And who wouldn't want to get their relatives out of the flames of hell? And so these poor ignorant people would give money to try to get their loved ones out of purgatory into heaven. And they went all over Europe doing that, and raised a lot of money to build St. Peter's. They also sold indulgences, they sold, that's what Martin Luther wrote his 95 Theses about, was the selling of forgiveness for sin. And so people, confession. You had to go to confession. That was one of the 7 sacraments. And so people would come in with a letter saying, from the Pope saying, I was forgiven of all past and future sins because I made a nice donation to the church. And then that's what upset Luther, And that's why he wrote the 95 Theses. Almost all those theses were against indulgences. And he wanted to start a discussion in the church about we really need to reform and get this out because this is a bad thing. There's a book by a guy named Charles Chiniquy, 50 Years in the Roman Catholic Church. If you have not read it, it's very interesting. His father died unexpectedly when he was young. The Catholic priest in the town came out and said, "Would you like the last rites sacrament for your husband?" And she said, "Oh, yes, I would very much." And he said, "It will cost you 200, whatever. It's in Canada, whatever they have." And she goes, "Well, he left me very poor. I don't have any money." And he said, "Well, I see you've got a really nice cow out there. I'll take that." And she said, "How will I feed my children?" He said, "Do you want him in heaven or do you want him in purgatory?" And so the wife and the children are hearing this, and Charles is a young boy, and he's thinking, how could this man do this? And he wanted to be a pastor, a priest, and he did end up becoming a priest. And of course, he made a vow that he would never do that to anyone. But that just goes to show the links that they would go to. It's just criminal. Okay. Oh, yes. Forgiving sin, blasphemy. Luke 5 talks about that. And then, Luke 5, 18 to 25. When Jesus forgave the sins of the paralytic in Luke 5:18, he was accused of blasphemy. Who does he think he is? That's blasphemy. Only God can forgive sins. So it's right in the Bible. Catholic Church claims they have the authority. They can forgive sin. Revelation 13:18, so this is at the end of the chapter. On each head were written names that blaspheme God. And I wrote down here, I wonder what those names were. I'll show you a list of some titles of the Pope here coming up, see what you think. So, past or present papal titles: Supreme Pontiff, Father, Holy See, His Holiness, Vicar of Christ, Vicar of the Son of God, Vicarius Filii Dei. I think that's one and the same there, the last two. What does the Bible say about such names, calling someone holy, Holy Father? 1 Samuel 2:2, there is none holy like Jehovah. Right. Yeah. So you could say representative, or you could say substitute, and or in place of. And I think they look at it as in place of. Yeah. Then in Matthew 23:9, don't address anyone here on earth as Father. This is Jesus' words. I have them in red there. For only God in heaven is your spiritual Father. So the Catholics have the Bible. They read this, and yet they just disregard it. Yeah. You know, I watched 7 sermons that Randy Roberts did on, he's a pastor at Loma, senior pastor at Loma Linda University Church. the largest Seventh-day Adventist church in the world, 6,000 something members. And he did a series 23, he did a series on Revelation. And all my friends down there tell me, oh, it's the most wonderful thing. You have to listen to this. So on sermon number 1, he gives historicism, idealism, preterism, and futurism. And then, of course, Adventists are historicists. They've always been historicists. Their whole concept of these kingdoms that the beasts represent, the symbol 666, how it represents the title of the sea beast, okay? And then that all comes from historicism. And then he said, I will be approaching the prophecies and Revelation from the idealistic perspective. I was just like blown away. And anyhow, before he started, he read some emails that he got from his friend Gary Vinden. No, Gary, not Gary. Lee Vinden. And Lee says, and he reads them to the congregation, what good has it done us to point out that Vicarious Filii Dei is the title of the Pope? What good has it done us to all these things that we have against the Catholic Church? What good has it done us? What good has it done us? And he said he wouldn't be doing that, okay? So it's like there's a movement in the Adventist Church to not point out sin. I don't know. And then Stefanovic, Stefanovic was my hero. I thought he could do no wrong until I saw the idealism in his book. He's at Redwood Camp meeting, and he said the same thing. We should not be bashing the Catholics. We should not be pointing out these things. There's plenty of characteristics in Revelation. We don't have to do pull the Vicarious Filii Dei card on them. Pardon me? I know, it is bad. So anyhow, that's my feeling on it, but you can ask the Holy Spirit. It takes away all the pioneers' work on the sea beast and 666. It does. Beverly? Yeah, I was surprised by their, at the same time I'm studying this, things pop up like articles on why don't Protestants protest anymore? And you think about how dear this true message was to millions of people that were willing to die for their belief, and now we're being told, don't even bring it up. Pastor. Worship the dragon. Yeah. Okay. Well, this is taking longer than I thought, but I like this discussion and being able to ad-lib a little bit. Do you want to take a break? You want to stop and pick up next week, or you want to have a break and go on, or? Okay. Let me see how many more slides I have here. Well, you know what? We're about done with the CB's characteristics. The next thing I have is the 1260-day prophecy. I don't know if you're as curious as I was, but we all know when it ended, right? It's just no doubt about when it ended. The Pope is taken captive during at the end of the French Revolution, and I've never heard any evangelists say this, so I just thought I'd go into a little more detail on the 1260-day prophecy. And then I always felt bad that everyone just works back and says, oh, let's see, 1798, so it had to start in 538. Well, what kicked it off? What made it start? Is it wrong to go back like that? And I have a few things to say about that, but I think it'll go faster than what we've just done here. But I'd like to stay and do more, but if you're tired, it's been an hour, you want to go home, then we can pick it up another time. No, the 2300. No, that was 457 BC. Yeah. 538 is an interesting year. I got a few interesting things to tell you about that. It's almost as good as 666. What? Well, my partner told me at 45 minutes, give him a break, so. Isn't it interesting? I'm up here, I could just go on and on and on. But when I'm sitting out there, I can't go on and on. Yeah. Anyhow, this 538, I had no idea. I'll just tell you this little story. So we had a member here named William Shea. Did any of you remember him? So we got one in the balcony, and then my wife and I. All the rest of you are new since then? Isn't that something? Yeah. Yeah. So he was a member here for 5 or 6, 7 years, something like that. I think they let him preach 3 times. It was kind of Bill Shea. It was kind of unfortunate, but yeah, I had no idea the knowledge this guy had until after he was dead. Yeah, and so I'm on the internet looking at why the prophecy started in 538, and I come across this article, and Bill Shea is on it as an author, and I'd never heard of it. And so I called his wife, because Bill's dead now. I called his wife, and I said, Karen, do you know about this article? She said, no, I never heard of it. And everything, I call her and say, Karen, did you know that, did you go to the Glacier View Ranch Conference in Colorado in 1980 with Bill? You know, I think we did. I don't know. And so I asked her son, he's an obstetrician here in town, so I asked him, did you guys go to Glacier View? And he goes, yeah, I was just a young boy then, but yeah, we were there. And I said, anyhow, his dad writes like chapters in the Darkon books about what Adventists believe, and they're trying to get them out to the Adventist people. Well, Stefanovic asked me, have you heard of Darcom? I said, what? Have you heard of Darcom? How do you spell that? D-A-R-C-O-M. It stands for Daniel and Revelation Committee. No, I never heard of that. And anyhow, there is a series of books made as a result of this August of 1980 conference in Colorado at the Glacier View Ranch that were written because the Seventh-day Adventist Church wanted to get out to the people what they believed on the sanctuary, the investigative judgment, And then they thought, well, we'll throw in some prophecies in Daniel and Revelation too. So there was actually first 5 books, and then they added on 2 books, volume 6 and 7. Everybody I ask has never heard of them and doesn't have them. So I bought them. Have you heard of them? Oh, did you? Great. Did you ever tell your congregation about them and to get them? Wow. Anyhow, here Bill was in our audience. I had no idea. If I'd only known. I know. I do. Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyhow, in this article, there are like 12 authors in this article. And most of them are Korean. And a lot of this information came from our Adventist Theological Seminary in Korea. But Bill Shea's an author on it also. And they give, it's like a different perspective on the important event of 538 that kicked off the 1260-day prophecy. And I'll be telling you about that. Yeah, I just bought them a year or so ago. Yeah. Okay. So we left off with don't address anyone as a Holy Father. Okay. So the power of the church is not with the people in the pews. It is the papal cardinal bishop priest system of the church. This power was and remains the largest Christian denomination. Has Satan been successful with his false teachings that he has somehow gotten into the Christian church, if you want to call it Christian? You know, I even asked that question. Is a church Christian if it doesn't teach what Jesus taught? I don't know. Pardon me? Yeah, I don't know. Well, anyhow. Yeah. We've really cut them a lot of slack, I think, by not. Yeah. I don't know if I have that ability, but I'll experiment on a couple. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Sure. Go ahead. Thanks. So I asked the question, has Satan been successful with his false teachings? This church became the state church of the of the pagan Roman Empire as it converted from paganism to Christianity in 380. Things went downhill for God's people after that. The union of church and state's never a good thing. The most severe persecution of the Christians happened in 301 to 310 under the reign of Diocletian, where he killed, in fact, he had 10,000 of his own soldiers killed that would not bow down and worship him. They were Christian, probably. They could have been Arian or Zoroastrian or whatever, but they wouldn't bow to him anyhow. And I learned that when I went to Europe on the Reformation tour. And we were at a place called Abbey of the Three Fountains where Paul was executed. And they told the story there about this is where Roman citizens were executed. The non-Roman citizens were used for entertainment back in the Colosseum. But if you're a Roman citizen, they brought you outside the walls and killed you in this swampy area, which is now, of course, incorporated in the city. And they talked about this 10,000 soldiers that were killed. And they said, if you look out here, the terrain's all irregular, and that's because of all the graves that were dug out there. So, anyhow, I just put in here, friends, this is not a new concept. Theologians have known for hundreds of years that the sea beast of Revelation 13 represents the papal cardinal bishop system of the Roman Catholic Church. This was figured out long before the Seventh-day Adventist Church was established in 1863. So it is not an original idea of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Yeah. So the true Christian church of the apostolic age started changing very soon after Jesus' death, when it started incorporating man's ideas into its teachings. And in fact, we have evidence that, Paul wrote and some of the other apostles wrote about the Antichrist is already at work, and there are people, false teachers among you. So things were happening early on. This is something that Jesus warned his disciples about. And in fact, he even accused the religious Jewish leaders of doing in Mark 7:7 and 8, where he said, their worship is a farce, for they teach man-made ideas. And here's why I included it in here is man-made ideas, because a lot of the Catholic false doctrine is man-made idea. So they teach man-made ideas as commands from God, for you ignore God's law and substitute your own tradition. And, the Catholic Church is very big on tradition. The tradition of our fathers allows us to teach this as doctrine. So Paul mentions a lawless one already at work in the church in the first century in 2 Thessalonians. Several examples of man's ideas which were not in line with what the Bible teaches, that were making their way into the Christian church very early, like 2nd century, 3rd century. Infant baptism, confession, purgatory, penance, praying to the saints. After church and state united in the 4th century, its power grew throughout the Middle Ages, reaching its peak in the 11th, 12th, and 13th centuries. What types of religion-related and non-religion-related things did it do during its powerful reign, during its powerful 1,260-year reign? So one of the non-religious things it did was, through the donation of Constantine, it claimed it had authority over princes and kings. So it could actually coronate kings of different nations. It acquired its own lands, called the Papal States. It built its own army, built up its own army. Why would a church need an army? To enforce its laws. That's right. And the Catholics have what they call canon laws. Canon laws. They have 752 canon laws. And when they had power in the 11th, 12th, 13th centuries, they enforced their canon laws. Yeah, And in the end, they'll unite with the earth beast that we're going to talk about next time, and he will enforce their laws. So the people sitting out in the pews have been deceived. However, just like each one of us, the people in the pews have the responsibility to study and show themselves approved unto God. I started talking about the church laws a little bit. The canon in Greek means rule. So these are their rules. There are 752. The bishop used these laws for hundreds of years because they were the judges in the towns throughout the countries of Europe. So that's where this the practice of a roving preacher and a roving judge came from. So a bishop would go from town to town to town in his parish, and he would be the person that judged the criminals. And most of it was done with their canon laws. This was done throughout the Dark Ages. A lot of power for a church, right? The Roman Catholic Church called several church councils and many synods over the centuries, during which it added doctrines and laws to the Christian church, many of which were not in keeping with the teachings in the scriptures. They were man's traditions. Jesus called these traditions leaven, which stood for sin. Salvation by grace through faith was considered to be a heretical teaching by the Roman Catholic Church during the Middle Ages, and it still is, as a matter of fact. The doctrine of transubstantiation was incorporated in the church at the Council of Trent in 1545. That was a long council. It lasted from 1545 to 1563. Several important things happened during that time. That's where they came up with the idea of tradition, that God has given this church power, and the Protestants claim that sola scriptura, or we're going to say tradition, is our answer to that. So the people did not have the right to believe that the communion bread and wine are only symbols of Christ's body and blood. You know, you've got to wonder how many people died because of that thought or belief. Through union of church and state, it uses laws to force everyone to accept its false doctrines or be punished, often severely, even unto death. Millions were put to death. I used to read 50 million, now I see 100 million a lot. So when you're off that far, I guess you have no idea. But it's a lot. Yeah. It put the pagan Roman rule to shame with so many deaths. So, the papacy received a seemingly deadly wound in February of 1798 when the Pope was taken captive in Rome, stripped of his power, and put in prison. We'll look at this in a little more detail later. Anyhow, I could go on, and you've all seen some very interesting magazine articles and video clips and other comments at the evangelistic series that we've had here. But I think we all have heard enough from the historical record now and in the past to conclude that the papal system of the Roman Catholic Church is the sea beast power. And then I put this in here. If there are any Catholics here today hearing this for the first time, I can't help but think about how hard it must be to hear this, to hear that the church that you and probably your entire family, or perhaps even for generations, are or were members of, developed a false sense of a false Christian religion mixed with paganism, which persecuted Christians, killing millions of them during this powerful 1260-year reign. However, the Bible is very clear. So before we proceed to the lamb-like beast, I just want to take a little time to look at the 1260-year reign. It's mentioned in Daniel 7:25, it's mentioned in Daniel 12:7, and it's mentioned in Revelation 11:3, Revelation 12:6, Revelation 13:5. In Daniel, we're told that it's a length of time that God's people will be persecuted by the little horn power. In Revelation, we're told that the sea beast will have power over them and persecute them. Now, these two prophecies were written 600 years apart, obviously by different people, and yet they're kind of telling us the same thing. The deadly wound seems easy to determine, but when we look back in history, what event triggered it? Is it okay to look backwards and come up with the event? And I think it's biblical that it is okay, and I'll show you why here. Oh, by the way, when the Pope was removed from power, it wasn't a temporary thing. So during the French Revolution, the new governing entity was called the Directorate, or the Director, I think, just the Director. And the Roman Catholic Church had oppressed the people for a long time. They had levied taxes on them and mandatory tithes, and the aristocratic people, educated people, didn't like it at all. And so when they had a chance to take over and change the law, they made it really bad for the Roman Catholic Church. They wanted the Pope removed. They wanted that office to be done away with, and they wanted him to lose all power and authority. And it was their intent that he would never have power again. There wouldn't be a Pope ever again. And in fact, pardon me? Yes. They did. A year or two later, they elected another pope. They did it in Ravenna rather than in Rome because of problems that had arisen after the French Revolution. And who was going to, when Napoleon decided he wanted to be the dictator instead of a general in the army, who is he going to have coronate him? And so he had the Pope that the Catholic Church had secretly voted in come and anoint him, put the crown on him, do his coronation service. However, you know, we all say Napoleon directed this, but he didn't. Napoleon actually did not want the Pope to be removed. He wanted to put up a puppet Pope that they could work with, because he knew, you know, the population was 98% Catholic, and that the people loved him and worshiped him. And so he told the director, this parliamentary group that was governing France, it would be better if we just had our own Pope, to not do away with him. But they had it with him, and they wanted him done away with. They actually sent Napoleon to England, and then Belisarius went in and took him out, because Napoleon had already conquered Italy a year or two before, and he had a home base there, and he wanted to work with the Pope. And so anyhow, they moved him out, brought Belisarius in. He went in and got him out of the Vatican. Oh, I see I got ahead again. Oh, by the way, 16,000 square miles is equal to the combined area of Tehama County, Shasta County, Trinity County, and Siskiyou County. So here's a story about that. I just told you. Napoleon's headquarters were in Rome, and the directory sent Berthier to Rome on February 10, 1798, and demanded him to renunciate his authority. He refused, and so he said, basically, come and get me. And so they gave him 5 days to give up, and he did not. And so they sent an army in, or I don't know how big of they sent a force in, and they had a short battle and killed a few people, and then the Pope voluntarily surrendered, and they took him. Some accounts say it happened on the 13th, some accounts say it happened on the 15th. Over a period of months, he was moved from place to place and ended up in Valence, France, where he died in a citadel there. And I think that it's interesting that he refused to just give up. There had to be a battle, because there's 2 verses between the sea beast and the earth beast. And in Revelation 13:10, it says, anyone who leads to prison will be taken to prison, and anyone who kills by the sword must die by the sword. And how many people had the Pope lead to prison, so to speak? And how many people did he kill? So you'll see this depending on your translation. Some say different than what I have written here, but I think this is the way it should be translated. This is the King James, and the New Living Translation translate it the same way, but some others have it a little different. It indicates more that Christians are going to be persecuted. So it was the intent of the French leaders to forever put an end to the office of the Pope. Half of Europe thought that the Church of Rome and the papacy were mortally wounded. The first step in healing occurred on March 3, 1800, when Pope Pius VII, so Pope Pius VI was the one that was taken captive. Pope Pius VII was anointed, in Venice. He was anointed in Venice because the French were occupying Rome at the time. This was a time of great uncertainty in the Roman Catholic Church. Here's some pictures. This is Berthier, Louis Alexander Berthier. This is Pope Pius VI, humble-looking man. And then this is the citadel where he was imprisoned in Valence, France, and died there. This is in Rome. This is called the Lateran Palace. This was the home of the popes for 1,000 years. That big obelisk you see there is one of the Egyptian obelisks. It was made in 1475 BC, I believe it was. It's the largest and heaviest obelisk in the world. So it's appropriate that it should be outside the Lateran Palace. Actually, I don't think I have a different picture. Just to the right of that obelisk, you can just barely see it on the edge of the film. There is a cathedral there, and that cathedral is the seat of the Pope. So the Pope is the bishop of one church in Rome, and it is that church. It's called St. John's Lateran. Everyone would think it was St. Peter's, but it's not. St. John's Lateran it's called the Holy See, and there is a throne in there that they have a service once a year. They have this special door that only he goes through, and he goes in and sits on that throne and has some ceremony. And learned this when we went over there for the Reformation tour. I always thought that the number one basilica would be St. Peter's, but it's actually St. John's Lateran, which is outside of the Vatican. How did they get this land? Nero confiscated it from the Laterini family in somewhere around 60 BC because of charges of conspiracy. The palace was built in the early 300s, which was given to Constantine the Great after he married the sister of Emperor Maxentius in 312. Later that same year, Constantine defeated Maxentius at the Milvian Bridge and became the emperor. It's been extensively added to. It was a papal home from the 300s on until the papal quarters in the Vatican were built. Okay. Well, I don't know what to tell you. I can tell you a story about this, though. I have this coin. I bought it. Now, can you imagine? I'm preparing this sermon. I went into the Gold Mart on Hilltop, and Denine's asking him a question about some stationery she had with gold in it. Could they reclaim the gold off of it? And I'm just wandering around, and I have seen this coin in Bill Shea's article, and there's one in the cabinet. So I bought it. It's like 25, 28 bucks or something like that. And anyhow, you want to stop? So the coin, see, that's Justinian the Great right there. This is a coin made early in his reign. And he's wearing his military garb on a horse with a spear, and he's got his military helmet on. In the 12th year of his reign, he said, "I'm no longer a military leader, I'm a theologian." And from then on, he started doing theological stuff. And he had this coin minted. And it says year 12 of his reign, and he's got Christian cross. He's holding a cross in his right hand. There's another cross beside his head on the left. He's no longer on a horse. He doesn't have his chain. He doesn't have his armor on. He doesn't have his helmet on. He's not holding a spear because now he's a theologian. So, yes, that's a coin minted of Justinian during the 12th year of his reign. It's like a penny. So it wasn't that expensive. There's a lot of them, they told me, at Chuck's Coin. Anyhow, so in this article that talks about these coins that Bill Shea authored, he said, could it be that when the Emperor of Rome decided he was a theologian, could that be the defining event in 538 that kicked off the 1260-day reign? Because what does God care about conquering the Heruli or the Vandals or the Visigoths? He doesn't care about stuff like that. He would care about a religious transition, right? And I thought it was a very good article. It's 42 pages long journal article in some journal I've never heard of with a really long title. But I just thought to be complete, I would put that in here as part of 538. Why did that happen? Yes, and here's Jesus told us these words. I have told you these things before they happen, so that when they do happen, you will believe. And then another time in Matthew, I have warned you about this ahead of time. So, is it okay for us to look at something that's happened and then look back and say, well, then it must have, if you're looking at a time prophecy and it ended in 1798, then it would be okay to go back and say that it started in 538 because he showed us this stuff so that we would recognize it. That doesn't tell us what event happened, but I think that you can remember stuff a little better if you have an understanding of what was going on at the time. And so I just put together a little bit about what was happening in the first half of the 6th century. The empire became so large in 286 that Diocletian decided that there should be two emperors, one from Constantinople and one from the Italian peninsula. Now, you would think I'd say Rome, right? Well, they didn't all choose Rome for their capital. They chose Milan, Ravenna, Paris. A couple of emperors reigned from Paris. And so you had the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire. So this two emperor system existed for about 190 years. What ended it? The Arian Visigoths took it over in 476, the western part. Constantinople was the capital from 330 on, So Justinian the Great was ruling from the east during the time period we're talking about. He was emperor from 527 to 565. He achieved lasting fame because of his judicial reform, including the undertaking of a revision of all Roman laws. This legislation was finished in 534, not 538. These laws were so popular that countries used them for 900 years. Countries of Europe liked these Roman laws, and they used them for 900 years. His laws contained statutes that decreed total destruction of paganism, persecution of Sabbath keepers, and then historical sources tell us that these provisions were zealously enforced, and there was severe persecution of pagan Romans and Sabbath keepers during his reign. And in his new laws, he declared the Pope to be the head of all Christendom in 533, not in 538. He further ordered all Christians to submit to him. He gave the Pope civil authority with the power to decide life or death over heretics, which included pagans. Sabbath keepers, Arians, and other heretics, he gave him power to rule over them. However, the Roman Empire was not in control of Rome for 476 until the year 538. So this power could not be implemented until 538. So you may have been told that there were some powerful tribe was defeated in 538, kicking off the 1260-day prophecy, but I can't find any battles that go to that happened at that time. The Arians. Yeah. Well, how about this? There's even controversy over the three tribes. And I'll talk about that briefly. Right, but the question is taken out of the way. Now, we've always heard that they were eradicated and exist no more, right? Well, the Ostrogoths were defeated in 530. Well, they were kicked out of Rome in 537 or 536. They came back in March of 537 and set up a siege. And there was a very nice battle plan. They attacked their capital from the east. So a force comes from the east, it goes down to Africa, wipes out the Vandals, goes to Sicily, takes out the Visigoths, comes up to Naples and kicks out the Ostrogoths. Then it marches on Rome, and the garrison in Rome said, we think we don't have enough power here, we'll retreat. They retreat to their capital in Ravenna, about 235 miles north of Rome. And their king says, you know what? It's late in the year. Let's pull in some troops from other areas and we'll go back in the spring and we'll siege them. So in March, 100,000 Ostrogoths go to Rome and surround the city. So then Justinian sends an army from Constantinople to attack their capital, Ravenna, where all their wife and children and relatives are left alone because they got all 100,000 soldiers trying to take out Rome. They send a runner. The runner says, hey, they're attacking us from behind. So the whole 100,000 heads out back to Ravenna to try to keep their capital from being taken. Of course, Belisarius, who was a very capable general, had very brave, good soldiers, and they chased them down and killed them all the way back to Ravenna. But they came back some years later. I have the dates in here, but I don't remember them. The Ostrogoths came back and captured Rome again. They weren't wiped out until like 558 or 559, something like that. So in an attempt to take the Italian peninsula, Justinian's very capable general, Flavius Belisarius, conquered the Visigoths in Sicily in 535. I'm sorry, he conquered, yeah, right. So first, he went to the Vandals in North Africa. I didn't put that part in here. Then they sailed over to Sicily and took out the Visigoths in 535. Then they went up to Naples in 536. Then they marched from Naples to Rome in December of 536. As he entered the city, the smaller Ostrogoth force that was left there in Rome, a garrison that was left there, just left. They just pulled out. There was no battle. And the Italians were so happy because they hadn't had that. The Ostrogoths took over in 476. This is the first Italian army that's come there to try to free them, and since 476, it's 536. And so the Ostrogoths rightly thought, all the people will be against us. And so they said we wouldn't have to not only fight the army, we'd have to fight all the people, all the citizens of Rome. So they just withdrew. Then the reason they only had 4,000 people there was soldiers, the Ostrogoths, was because they never sacked Rome. See, when the Visigoths took it in 410, and when the Vandals took it in 455 or 56, they sacked it. But the Ostrogoths just moved in. Their king let them worship. He let the Senate keep functioning, and so they got along pretty well. And because they didn't have a lot of rebellious activity, they didn't have to keep a big force there to maintain order. So Belisarius took it with only he didn't even have to take it. He just walked in with 5,000 soldiers, and the garrison of 4,000 left. Also, something that's happening in the Ostrogoth monarchy was the reigning king was murdered in December of 536, and a new king was chosen. The new king didn't have a large enough army in the peninsula, so he pulled out. And his plan was to come back with a larger army. Over the winter, they recruited soldiers from all over, and he came back in March of 537 with 100,000 men and laid siege to the city. They were outnumbered 5-1, but they could not conquer Belisarius' well-trained army behind the very tall and thick walls of Rome. So they sent in a force behind them. They left. And here are the dates. After recuperating from the siege and reinforcing his army, Belisarius marched north, taking Milan and the Ostrogoth capital of Ravenna in 540, not in 538. The Ostrogoths came back in 546 and sacked Rome this time, and they were not defeated until 553. So you may have heard it said also that Justinian appointed a pope in 538. However, Belisarius was the one who appointed the pope. His name was Vigilus. He was appointed on March 39, 537 to take the place of the pope which had been appointed by the Ostrogoths. Oh, these are pictures of the gates that this is called the Asinarian Gate or Farmer's Gate. Asinarian means the gate of the donkeys. It was first built in 275 A.D. Belisarius came in through this gate from the south on December 9, 536. I got to tell you a little story here. So we're there in Rome during the 500th Reformation, and we ate 2 days in a row lunch at this vegetarian buffet place. And so I'm a fast eater, and so when I finished eating, I went out walking around, and I didn't even go a block, and I come into this plaza, and I took pictures of this, okay? Then I'm doing this sermon like years later, and I said, I've seen that before. I have a picture of that. So I went back to my pictures, and I went through them, and I found it. And this is called Plaza de Popolo, which in my ignorance, I assumed was Plaza of the Pope, but it's not. Popolo means people. This is the Plaza of the People. And it didn't look like this in 538. Pope Sixtus IV rebuilt it and, of course, made it very grandiose. Okay, this is the, oh, wait a second. Oh, there it is. I'm sorry, that one. That is the Flaminian Gate. That is the one that the Ostrogoths exited to the north as they left. It's named after Gaius Flaminius, who was, so one of the Adventist people said that the seven heads represent the seven forms of the Roman government. And so they had kings, consuls, proconsuls, triumvirate, dictator, and a couple others probably. Well, during the time of the consuls, Gaius Flaminius was a consul, and he made this road called the Flaminian Road. And they had these roads that helped them move their armies very quickly to the north, to the west, to the south, or to the east. And so this road's named after this guy. And when he built it, he just had just a simple stone archway. And then somebody decided to rebuild it and make it look like that. Okay. Yeah, this gate was rebuilt by Pope Sixtus in 475. So that's Justinian the Great. He ruled the Roman Empire from 527 to 565, so 538 happened during his reign. And then here is his coin minted early in his reign. And as I told you, in his 12th year, he became a theologian, was no longer considered a warrior. And so that's the coin that was minted in the 12th year of his reign. And although it was gradual, beginning with Constantine back in 306, there was a transition from the pagan Roman Empire to a religious Roman Empire. Between 508 and 538, a more rapid and complete shift occurred as a result of several factors. Now, if you can imagine, we haven't had an emperor in Rome since 576. And who's the persistent presence there? The Pope. And the Pope was very wealthy. He had all these lands. He had estates in other island nations. And if there was a famine, he could provide food. If there was a plague, he could provide, quote, a hospital where they could go to either recover or die. And so he was beloved by the people. And they haven't seen an emperor for decades because he's in Constantinople. So the lack of a Western emperor and the fact that the Ostrogoths were ruling since 476 because of famine and plagues and the persistent presence of the Pope his power just grew and grew as loyalty to him. So the people looked to the church, the one steady power in Rome throughout the difficult years. Okay, quick summary. During the year 538, the papal system of the Roman Catholic Church entered upon a new era in its history that led to spiritual and civil dominance unknown to the Roman Catholic Church before that time. This continued for centuries until either February 13 or 15, 798, when a seemingly deadly wound was delivered by the French army. The wound is slowly healing. That's a subject for next time. If you're going to talk about the downfall of the Roman Empire, you quickly have to mention Attila the Hun. So Attila in Mongolia area, he started moving south. And as he moved south, all these people want to get away from him. And so they start moving south. And then here's all of a sudden these hordes of some foreign languages are moving into the Roman Empire from the north. So any tribe above the Danube, the Romans referred to as Germanic. But these people weren't Germans as we know Germans. They were probably from the Ukraine, around the Black Sea. And as they came down, then the people that lived, the Anglo-Saxon people in the Netherlands and up in that area, all the people around the Baltic Sea, that they started moving down into the Roman Empire and caused problems. So I just wanted to quickly mention the Attila and his, sure? No, anybody above the Danube they thought were these Germanic barbarians. But what happened is some of them got converted. And they got converted, unfortunately for them, to the Arian Christian religion. So the Visigoths, the Ostrogoths, and the Vandals were all Arian. They were determined to be heretics at whatever council it was I told you about earlier. And so when you look at this prophecy that the three horns fell before the small horn that grew up, that indicates that it was the religious entity that took them out. And they took them out because they were Arian heretics. Well, you've always heard they're barbarians, but they weren't barbarians. They were Christians. So, yeah, they didn't believe in the Trinity. They were the Jehovah's Witnesses of the day. No, I don't remember the date. Maybe I have it in here. Let me just read this to you quickly here. So Attila comes down, the quotes Germanic tribes in the north fled south, invading the Roman Empire. They're just trying to get away from Attila. Any people north of the Danube were called Germanic by the Romans. It didn't take many years for them to migrate clear down through the Italian peninsula all the way to Rome. The Eternal City was first sacked by the Arian Visigoths in 410. They are not barbarians. They were Arian Christians. The Arian Vandals, also called Germanic, had moved as far south as North Africa. They sacked Rome in 455. They also were not barbarians. I think barbarians would be like a pagan nation with, pagan practices, whereas these people worship God, but just didn't think Jesus was divine, equal to God. The Arian Ostrogoths were also considered Germanic, they conquered the Visigoths by 476, therefore controlling most of Italy. They were also not barbarians. So these three tribes are Aryan, not pagans, as most of the other tribes were. So I spent a lot of time, because we're told that every evangelistic series that it's the Heruli, the Vandals, and the Visigoths, right? And so I looked and looked and looked and tried to figure out why we say that. And there's a guy named Odasser. He may have been a Heruli, and he was the head of a mercenary group of Rugii and Sciri or something like that, who were mercenaries in the Roman Empire's army. And he was in the area of Ravenna, which was the capital of the Western Empire, in 476. And there was an 11-year-old boy who was left by his father to be the emperor of Rome. His father's name was Orestes. He knew they were coming. He didn't want to die. He crowns his son emperor and leaves. His son's name is Honorius Augustulus. And when Theodoric, the Ostrogoth, came in, he felt sorry for this young boy, and he gave him a pension and sent him to live someplace with his family, and didn't even kill him. And that's when, Odasser, Odasser, I think it is, he left, and then Theodoric said, let's get together and be friends. And so they had a big banquet, and Theodoric killed him at the banquet. And so that's when the Ostrogoths took over the Roman peninsula from the Visigoths. That was in 476. That's the date that is considered to be the fall of the Roman Empire. So then I got to thinking, well, maybe, now we're talking about ancient history here. And why, I think Uriah Smith said Heruli, Vandals, and Visigoths. Why did he say that? Well, I found another very nice Adventist article, a guy getting his PhD, so he writes an article about the three tribes that were taken out. And he said, when you look at the history that we have, we know that the Visigoths sacked Rome in 410. We know that the Vandals sacked Rome in 455 or 56, whatever it was. And we know that the Ostrogoths conquered it in 476. All three were Aryan. They all had a death decree against them because they were heretics by the Roman Empire. And so he said, I think that we should be telling people that it was the Visigoths, Ostrogoths, and Vandals, not the Heruli. And so, I just throw it out there. I don't think if you believe one or the other, you're not going to go to heaven. But it's an interesting, like you were talking, there's progression of knowledge. Yeah. But I think I think the key is that Odasser was Heruli. And he was the leader of this army. He's the one that rebelled and went into Ravenna and took out, he would have killed Orestes, but he didn't kill his 11-year-old boy. And maybe because of that, down through history, they perpetuate that it was the Heruli. But you can almost find nothing about the Heruli. They're such a small tribe, probably from the Black Sea area. 4 different leaders. Well, that could be the Huruli, the Vandals, the Visigoths, and the Ostrogoths. Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is you say there's 4, but yet in Daniel's prophecy, only 3, only. Yeah. Anyhow, I thought it made sense that the papal army would like to take out these heretical Christian nations. And I just throw it out there. I don't know if it was the Huruli and the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths, or the Huruli, the Vandals, and the Visigoths, but we know there's progression of knowledge. We've seen it in a lot of areas, and is this one? I just throw it out there. Oh yeah, where did the Arian religion come from? So there was a guy, a presbyter, he's an older guy, in the 4th century. He came up with this idea that God alone is immutable and self-existent, and the Son is not God, but a creature with a beginning. And so that has been accepted by people down through the millennia. Yeah, Arius. And so that's where this Arianism comes from. So what is wisdom? It's a deep understanding of a subject. The deep understanding gives us the ability to apply perceptions and judgments. So we look at John's vision. He sees a future event relative to his time where a nation would rise up after the Roman Empire fell in a land of many people, nations, and languages, on the continent where God's people are predominantly located. And I looked up the population of Europe in the 6th century, and it said it was 50 million. So that's a lot of people. And that fits the prophecy that this power would rise in an area of a large population with many different countries and tongues. So the pagan Roman Empire didn't have a battle with the sea beast and was conquered by the sea beast. It wrote laws and gave it its power. And then the sea beast has multiple characteristics that perfectly fit with the characteristics of the Roman Catholic Church during that 1260 years. So this is a good place to end today. Next time we'll do the same thing. We'll look at the two-horned lamb-like beast, and we'll plug in the symbols and see if we can figure out what that power represents. If you want to read a little more about it, you could read J.N. Loughborough's short book about the two-horned beast. You can go to the E.G. White Estates app, and you go to Pioneer Authors, find J.N. Loughborough, and it's a 72-page book on the two-horned beast, the two-horned lamb-like beast. So that's it. Almost a little over 2 hours. That's probably unacceptable. I'll never be allowed to do this again. I like the format, and oh, really? Okay, well, I'll go longer next time. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we could do that. Well, I really enjoyed doing this. I think you can probably tell. And I try to make it different than the Daniel and Revelation seminars you've had by giving you a little more background information, so it'll be a little easier to remember, and it kind of makes sense because you know what was happening in the world at that time and what caused these things to happen. But you know, just because I like something doesn't mean that everybody else will.